Hello there. Welcome back to another episode of the Gaming News Canada show. And yep, I'm your host, Steve McAllister. The Grand Slam of Curling makes its third stop of the 2024-25 season next week at St. John's, Newfoundland. We expect there to be a full plate of throwing, sweeping, yelling, singing, and consuming alcohol on the world's best men's and women's curlers gather on the Rock. Back in April, the GCOS came under new ownership as the Curling Group acquired the series from Sportsnet. At the time of the announcement, the chief executive officer of the newly formed company promised to bring the Grand Slam of Curling to the next level. We certainly like what we've seen from the first two stops in Charlottetown and Nisku, Alberta, and figured the time was right to bring back to the podcast the one and only Nic Sulsky, the CEO of TGC, and also joining us today is the co-founder and head of product for Alt Sports Data, Michael Jordan. Hey, Nic, so good to get you back on the show again. And Michael, this is your maiden appearance on the podcast. So, given the Nic's along with us, just hang on tight for the ride here.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to be back, Steve. This is it's like coming home. It's like a nice warm blanket.
It's it may be the best reunion, Nic, that I've had in 2024. Hey, as you know, Nic, we like to be the bearers of breaking news on the podcast, and so you have brought along a gift for us today, and so very briefly and with a slight bit of trepidation, I'm going to turn the show over to you and let us know what's going on.
Yeah, well, thanks, Steve, and I am more than honored to be able to share your stage with Michael. It's a really, it's exciting for us, as my background in sports gaming, and after being one of the fortunate folks to help kick off the Ontario regulated gaming industry, one of the things that I've been obsessed with is how to bring proper betting into the sport of curling. And the reality is you can't have betting if you don't have live data and you don't have live odds projections models that you can provide to operators. And so I'm beyond ecstatic that TCG and Alt Sports Data, a company that Michael's a co-founder of, was able to, come to an agreement. And we are now long-term partners. Steve, I know you were mentioning that it's your 36th wedding anniversary today. Congratulations. And I just celebrated my 21st. And so, Michael, I guess this is day one of what hopefully will be as long of a marriage as both Steve and I have had. So, to be able to partner with a company like Alt Sports Data to finally bring the great sport of curling into the proper live betting arena is so exciting. And I think the sky is or the sheet's the limit. I've got to work on that one. Sorry, Michael.
Hey, Michael, I want to ask you, get you to dig into the details a little bit of what you're going to do for the curling group, but this partnership makes a lot of sense. Just doing some research for the podcast. I mean, Alt Sports Data is certainly a very appropriate moniker, giving your partnerships with the owners of Championship Drag Racing, the World Surf League, Professional Bull Riders, Disc Golf Pro Tour, and several other what we'll call alternative sports organizations. And again, you're also quite well entrenched in the legal sports betting industry through your partnerships with DraftKings, FanDuel, Bet365, BetMGM, Caesars, and Underdog Fantasy, just to name a few. Just for people out there that understand the sports betting industry and understand the relevance of data, as Nic mentioned, like what does this partnership look like for you?
Well, it's a really exciting one for us, and alternative sports was where we started. It's where my co-founders and I had a lot of experience in the industry of action sports like surfing, skateboarding, and they came from GoPro. So we identified that these sports could benefit a lot from sports betting, and as it became more legal, we could increase the ecosystem for all the athletes involved. And now we're at a point where we're growing a lot and partnering with curling is a really good opportunity for us because it's less of an alternative sport, especially if you're talking about in Canada. It's a very major sport. It's got a lot of fans. It's got dedicated fans that I saw when I was at the event. And these people are really knowledgeable and into it and passionate. And because it's less of an alternative sport, we're starting to merge into these underserved sports. And I think that's a better definition for where we're heading is underserved sports in the betting and gaming atmosphere. So we're really excited to bring something that, talking to fans of curling at the event and engaging with them, they would love to participate and bet on curling. And they have, and they do, but their experience isn't amazing. It's not the worst they can. It's available, but we know that we can make it better with improving the data capture on site and the connectivity of the systems that curling uses to create much more dynamic and in-game betting opportunities and gaming opportunities. It's really exciting.
Hey Nick, I want to get into the in-play betting for a second. Right? I do want to mention that the this partnership of the what I'll call the four-pronged variety. There's a media integration component. There's advanced analytics, new revenue streams, and enhanced fan engagement. And we had Phil Gray on the podcast last week and talking a lot to Phil about the continued boom in in-play betting, and this was something that you and I talked about for the better half of 2+ years in your previous role as chief commercial officer at PointsBet Canada, and the leading edge work that PointsBet had done with in-play betting. Just for people who don't follow curling closely, Nick, like when Michael talks about in-play offers, what are the kinds of things that you'd like to see this partnership bring in terms of offering more betting products around curling events?
Well, I mean, I think that I'll start here. As Michael alluded to, there is some limited gambling that exists around curling that I'd say a handful, less than 5 operators offer, and primarily it's all pre-match core markets, which means there is no live betting in curling really. To be a little bit more specific, Grand Slam of curling events have 8 ends. There's 8 shots per end, right? That means that there are over 104 live betting moments. I think that was fast math right there. I think I got it right. 104 live betting moments every game that are completely and totally ignored right now. And that doesn't take in consideration just the kind of overall live core markets of, spread totals and money lines. So I think that and to Michael's point, or to bring in a little bit more clarity right now, the sport of curling and the data that's being collected is being collected by volunteers sitting in an arena with an old desktop computer and a mouse and drop downs. Right. In order for the data captured to be able to happen in real time, an entirely new system has to be designed and built, which is one of the main reasons why Michael was out with his team in Nisku, Alberta, during our last event, was not just building and prototyping, but getting validation from the folks who are actually recording the data to see if it would actually work. This type of data and analytics, I believe, is going to revolutionize the sport, not just from a betting perspective, but from a media engagement and data perspective, from a sports and from a team analysis perspective, because now teams are going to be able to get deeper into the data on the analytical side, like we've seen happen in every other kind of core, as Michael said, less underserved sport, right? And we've launched a bunch of innovations for curling over the last month and a half, and this one will take a little bit of time, but when it's built, I think this relationship will go down in history as the one that really helped propel curling to the next level.
It's interesting, Nick. When I hear you talk about that, it makes me think. And again, I'm a casual curling follower, but you see when you watch a broadcast, we see the percentages by the shot makers. We see the curlers holding stopwatches, but I've never heard unless I missed it, I've never heard a commentator explain what the stopwatches are for. And I think, from a data standpoint, broadcasts just really skim the surface. And again, not that we want to over data size, I call it a curling match, but I think there are ways to use the data and to enhance that broadcast experience, and we've seen that with other sports. Michael, the question for you is, I guess, is there one of your clients right now, a sports organization, where you see some parallels between that and what you've seen in your brief experience with curling?
Yeah, there are some parallel sports that we work with, and at different tiers of that parallel. We work with a combat sport, a boxing league that didn't have a data capture system at all. They were typically just recording in an Excel spreadsheet, and it was pretty loose. For our purposes, we can't really run an automated sports betting data product with that. So we actually have built them an interface where they could create fights, create events, log the details of those fights, what round it ended in, and who won and by what. Was it a decision, who the judges were, and give them those tools in an interface that they can log it, and then it becomes part of the database for us, and we also can feed it back to their website as data. Curling is very similar to that for us now, in that we're coming in, we're trying to unify the systems that are present at a curling event and let them contribute data in an automated but also fast and accurate way. And so improving those connection points, the output of it, providing the volunteers and people who are logging stats and operating the clock on those site, we will provide them with better tools and more engaging and useful UIs. One of the things that came from this visit to NISCU was the sort of viewing the volunteers logging the stats on desktop computers with mouse and drop-down menus. And we identified that it's a device called a Stream Deck, and it looks like just a bunch of buttons on a handheld device that all are icon-based, and it's very fast. You don't really have to look at the actual device. You can watch more of the game and log much more quickly, and we can build automations that move the stats logging from one rock to the next one. For that, it's a little bit more of an advanced build out of a data logging system, but we've done it for a few combat sports in the past that didn't have anything at all. So yeah, I think that's not a direct comparison, but it's very similar.
And Nic, I want to get into a little bit later about the curling group and growing the sport, not just in Canada, but globally, and what give us some insight what your plans are. But just on the data piece, it seems to me it would also help you, but it will also help other curling organizations, and certainly Michael and his group, in having access and being able to provide a bigger data set around Curling Canada events or the World Curling Federation events, and basically collecting data from every curling competition there is across the country. And maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here and putting you on the spot, but is that a fair assessment, that ideally Michael and his team would have access to as much curling data as possible and be able to do for other organizations what they're going to do for the Grand Slam?
Well, putting me on the spot, eh? Not that you're not used to doing that, eh? I mean, I'll be as candid as I always am with you, man. We are investing a significant amount of money in partnering with Alt to build this data ingestion and distribution platform, for lack of a better word. It obviously behooves us to help the entire sport of curling grow, because as I've said many times, a rising tide lifts all boats. We will love to partner with other organizations to be able to leverage the solution and the technology that we're building. I'll just say what that commercial relationship could look like is TBD. I mean, at the end of the day, we're a business, right? One of the things that the world of curling hasn't really ever seen before is a company that's actually focused on generating revenue, right? I mean, this is one of the realities that I've come to learn about this sport. There are some great folks who have been instrumental in the development of this sport around the world, but a majority of those individuals work for not-for-profit international sports associations. Very few of them are focused on making money, right? And yes, we want to see the sport grow. We want to see money trickle down into the pockets of the curlers, but ultimately, this is a business for us. So we believe that by partnering with Alt to build the foremost and the best data collection tool for the sport of curling, we believe we're also building a revenue generation tool for our company and for our partnership. So to cryptically, or not less, I guess that wasn't that cryptic. It was like, yeah, we want to partner with everybody, but what's the business deal going to look like? Totally.
Hey, Michael, just putting betting aside for a second, it seems to me that there are some opportunities here with what you're going to be able to do that the coaches and players are going to be very excited about.
Yeah, I think so. Something that is a trickle-down effect of creating a system and process for the data logging and clock operators on site, from making it more seamless and easier and faster to use and more accurate, is going to be that we can tack on new data points to log. We can add to that system without breaking anyone's minds or hands. And so we can look at things like the stopwatch that the athletes carry. We've already talked to a few potential partners in the video tracking space, where we can actually start to use the video feed and AI to track players, what they're doing. And because the house is a very static view from the top, and the rocks are either moving or they're still, we're identifying opportunities to start using AI for advanced metrics, and not just rock speed, but how many points a team can possibly have at the end of this end, what their potential is, probabilities to win the end, and those type of granular things that are based off of video technologies that are emerging now. So, we're looking at a lot of different ways that we can enhance the data, and it starts with creating a system for the people that use it now that is a little bit reduced in the amount of friction that they encounter.
Hey, Nick, your sport's coming off a long way from the days where the players wore heavy cardigans and used corn brooms and smoke darts between ends, if not during ends, and probably had a sip of Jack Daniels as well. Um, Everything that I see with the players and the Grand Slam of curling, you're featuring among the best, if not the best, curlers in the world, who are, so many of them are very social media savvy. We've seen that it really has become a business. I mean, I think the player movement within the ranks is proof that, along with the sponsorship deals, we know how popular the sport's been on television in Canada. It seems to me that these players would be very receptive to being able to get their hands on the data that Michael and his team are going to be able to provide moving forward.
100%. I mean, name an athlete in a sport today that doesn't have data and analytics as a part of their training regime, a part of their pre-game, post-game strategy and analysis conversations with their coaches. I think that right now, a lot of the data has been cultivated in a, it's very similar to the perception of what curling is. Curling is a sport that most people perceive as something that's like stuck in the 70s and 80s. Well, the data tools that are at the disposal of curlers right now are the exact same thing. We want to now, my comment previously about partnering with other associations and federations and groups around the world, as it relates to us driving a business is one thing, but I'll say this straight up. This is the type of data that we need to deliver to the curlers, because we want these curlers not only to get better, but we want these curlers to start understanding and accepting the fact that they are elite professional athletes, right? Every professional athlete around the world right now is inundated to a certain degree with analytics and data. And to your point, to Michael's point, the curlers right now, they have stopwatches and they have coaches tracking things and they are doing things to the best of their ability. But I believe that the solution and the platform that we're partnering with Alt to bring to the curling world is going to make, I think it's going to make a generation of better, more thoughtful, more strategic curlers. Because to Michael's point, the probabilities of how many points are possible in a specific end is not just a value to the sports bettor and to the sports betting companies. It's also a significant benefit to the curlers. And if there's a way where they're able to start analyzing some of those trends in real time, I mean, it's going to benefit the sport. It's going to make it even more. It's going to make it even better.
Hey, Michael, Nic mentioned our respective wedding anniversaries a little earlier. Thanks for that, Nic. I'm always fascinated by kind of the backstory on how these partnerships come together. So I was hoping you could just tell the audience a little bit about the courtship between you and Nic.
Wow, that's a good question.
Me and Nic touched base a few times lightly back, I want to say in the 2012 to 2014 area. I was developing and building and launching my fantasy sports game for professional surfing, and we were attending conferences together in the DFS space when Nic, you were either at the end point or at the end of Monkey Knife Fight.
No, the beginning. It would have been just before. Yeah.
I remember you were just a wild dude, and I said, "Man, guy, he's got it. I like it." Just very passionate and a lot of, energy and excitement towards what you were building. I felt the same way. And then we branched off for 10 years. And then I think Alt Sports Data, our company, somebody knew you from PointsBet and brought you in a conversation for advising, just some high-level advice on DFS as we approached kind of DFS to get more market reach in the United States while sports betting is slowly becoming more legal. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get back on the phone with this guy. And it's been great ever since. And then curling became an opportunity for us after that. So it's been light touches here and there. And then I think that's how these relationships happen. And one day it clicks and you become very close by way of contract. And it's a very enjoyable experience.
Well, it's even deeper than that, Steve. It's there's a fun there's a fun I forget the word I'm looking for, but I think it might have even been Benji who kind of suggested, Benji Cherniak, friend of Gaming News Canada, friend of I think every human being in the gaming world, in like literally. I think he recommended me connect with Todd and Joe, Michael's two partners. And this conversation happened well before I'd even thought about the curling venture. And then it just so happened that we, as I was committing myself to making this jump into the roaring game, I had our first meeting with who then became our lead investor of the curling group and our fundraise, which we've already announced, John Albright and Relay Ventures. I had no idea that Relay Ventures was also a partner with Alt. So it just became a very interesting coincidence and a great validating point, not just for us, but I think also to a certain degree from Relay, because, John and I had never known each other. And John, one of his first impressions was, oh, he can't be that stupid if he's talking to Alt. I mean, geez, those guys are great, right? So there's a lot of coincidentals around our relationship building.
Nic mentioned, Michael, earlier that you and some members of your team flew out to Nisku for the Grand Slam of curling event. I think last month. I'm assuming that you maybe hadn't seen a curling game before. I just wonder what your thoughts were. And again, I think if anybody, it's just not the games just almost feels like a fraction of what a curling event's like. I mean, everything from the briar patch to the parties, and we're going to talk to Nic in a few minutes about the Grand Slam of karaoke. But curling really is an event, and it's a community, and that's not just a cliche. I mean, it's there's a real connection between the players and fans that I think probably is getting more and more lost in major professional sports today because of the cost of tickets and the tightening of access to professional athletes. Curling seems to be an outlier, but I'd be curious just on your first impressions of your first close encounter with curling.
That level of immersion between athletes and fans does not exist in any other sport that I've ever experienced or know about. These are Olympic athletes, gold medal Olympians, singing karaoke while fans cheer them on. I know you said you wanted to talk to Nick about the karaoke aspect, but these are people giving pounds, high-fiving fans as they're walking through a restaurant, grabbing beers because they just lost and they want to talk about it with people. People coming up to them and talking about the games, right in the mix. I've never experienced anything like this. These are not athletes that go into the locker room and then duck out a back exit, maybe sign a couple of shirts on their way out. These guys are in there taking pictures with people that want to talk to them, and they're just in the venue until everybody needs to go home if they're drinking or partying at night. It was such an insane institution as a sport with the highest level of athletes that you can have, and the way that they were interacting with people that was so normal for them. A very special thing.
It seems like that access too could actually benefit Alt because these athletes are accessible, they're also very, very smart people, and I'm sure they're going to want to provide you with their 2 cents worth on the kind of data that they're looking for.
That's right. And that will happen in any sport where you have a really engaged group of athletes that are at the highest level like that. Decisions that we make will have to involve them because it will impact them greatly. And, you know, we want them to be benefited from this entire project as much as anyone. The purpose of this is to give this curling league, and I know this is Nick's, most bold point, but, give it an uplift and a makeover that really attracts a younger audience with a lot of energy. And, we want to build a system that helps them out and creates more metrics for them to use and improve as players too.
And Nick, is there some type of timeline in terms of how this relationship's going to grow and when are new markets created and really just how you can, what else going to do that you can get that out to market with the sports betting operators?
Yes, and I'm gonna put Michael's feet to the fire a little bit here. Sorry, brother. The reality is the GCOS season begins kind of early October and it runs typically through the beginning of April, right? So what our platform and what our offering is going to look like next fall for the beginning of the next GCOS season will be different than what we hope, and I'll knock on wood, what we hope to be able to unveil in a beta of some sort for the Players' Championship in Toronto in April. Now, I will say that there's a lot of work ahead, and I'm not going to commit to anything. It's more of an aspirational goal is to end our first season, in control of the Grand Slam of curling by unveiling the first curling event that allows sports bettors to actually participate in markets that are not just core pre-match, as I mentioned, offered by 2 or 3 operators, right? So there's a lot of work ahead of us, and if it's not ready for Toronto, it'll be ready for the beginning of our next season. But we're in this for the long run, and there are 3 very obviously we're going to want to iterate and evolve and grow each season, each year of the Grand Slam of curling, and candidly, whatever other curling events we decide to unleash on the world. But we also want to listen to the fans. We want to hear what the fans want. We want to listen to the curlers, to your point. Like what sorts of data and analytics are they most excited in? Because if we're able to track the data and build models that an operator would be comfortable putting up and being able to manage that liability to engage their fans, I'm all for it. And one of the other very important pieces that we haven't touched on is, it's not just about having data and letting people bet on it, especially with the nature of curling and to a certain degree the perception of some of these. And I like what Michael said, kind of underserved sports, is there has to be a focus on integrity, because ultimately one of the most important things that any new sport, quote unquote, new sport needs to do is to validate their data collection protocol to regulators all over the world, because there has to be a strong base of integrity, or you're not going to get the type of regulatory approval that you need to be able to offer those markets. And that's one of the other reasons why Alt was at the very, very top of our list of partners, is because they've made a business or part of their business is not just in building the data protocols, but also working with leagues like Grand Slam of Curling to help make sure that we pass all of the integrity sniff tests to make sure that we can get regulatory approval. Because shit, man, if a tree falls in the forest and no one isn't around, doesn't make a sound. You can have the best betting platform, the best betting sport there is, but if you can't get regulatory approval, then what's the point, right?
I was going to mention that. Obviously, as you know, Nick, because you were in the middle of it, there's a very well-established marketplace, regulated marketplace in Ontario. Alberta's probably going to drop in 2025, and then you also have the existing provincial lottery, gaming and lottery corporations across the rest of the country. So there's opportunities there. Michael, just given that you had a chance to attend a Grand Slam event and the conversations you've had now with Nick, I mean, are there any concerns at all on that integrity issue that Nick raises?
It's funny. It came up a few times already, and so there were instances where someone was just using math to try and project some things, but the athletes all know that these are just fun internal games for them all to identify amongst themselves and to try and improve their games. Again, just trying to take data and how can they leverage that to improve their own game, and acknowledging that there's no opportunity for them once sports betting starts to be involved in that in any way. They're candid about it. One athlete mentioned that they were outreached to a few years ago in a sports betting potential setup, and they declined it and they reported it. And it was, I think these are athletes that understand the damage that can do to the game. I think that they have a lot of character, and I think there's a lot of unspoken or sportsmanship things that happen within curling that I think lend their hand to that, which is the honesty system. If you burn a rock and touch it with the broom, or if you concede, even if you can mathematically win, there's just a lot of that sportsmanship that I think lends itself against the idea that corruption can kind of be rampant here. And I think we saw that too. A lot of the athletes were open about discussing it and really averse to it, but you do have to go through those regulations, those processes, and get those certifications in the right way.
Yeah, and we have to build, and see, just to add on to that, we have to build a proper rules and regulation system for the sports bettor to understand, and even the curler. Like a case in point, during the last slam in Nisku, during the men's final between Team Mowat and Team Gushu, by the end of the game, it was very clear that Bruce and the guys were going to win. And so Brad's very last rock, he kind of went through his legs and. Right. So what are some of the rules that need to come into place so a sports gambler understands what the trickle-down impact of a handshake or a fun shot at the end will have on, especially on the totals, right? Because it's not just about who wins. It's about, there are a lot of gamblers that will bet on the totals, right? And so there needs to be very clear rules and protocols built, not just for the curler, but also so the curling bettor understands.
Yeah, and to Michael's point on integrity, I mean, Nick, you and I and Chris Abbott, we talked about this over 3 years ago when Chris was working for Coolbet and had curlers as brand ambassadors, and PointsBet had brand ambassadors from the curling world in its early days as well. And is there a feeling now that curlers are more educated today and are a lot more aware about sports betting than they were when we had those conversations in the early days of Bill C-218?
I mean, 1,000,000,000%. I mean, I think from a Canadian curler perspective, I mean, geez, one of the Curling Canada events is literally named after a sports betting company, right? So, I mean, and the reality is these athletes from all over the world have been living. I mean, folks in Europe have been living with sports betting pretty much their entire lives. Yeah. People in, athletes in Canada and the US, obviously, I mean, we've everyone who listens to this podcast knows, you turn on a television, you open up a website that's sports related, you're going to see betting ads, right? So, and you're going to get betting content and betting conversation. So, oh yeah, no, I think the curlers all are very aware, much more eager for it to come to the sport, because ultimately gambling is a proven revenue generator. Gambling is also a proven engagement tool to help bring the age demographic of a fan base down. And curlers, and it, obviously, and there's other sponsorship categories that get opened up by gambling, which adds more revenue into the sport. Ultimately, I think curlers all understand that for us to bring curling to the next level, where we can finally get to the point where a professional curler doesn't need a second job to put food on their table. I think they understand that gambling, it's not the end all be all, and it's not the like the golden goose or whatever it is, but it's definitely one of the pieces to the puzzle to help bring the sport to that next generation of curling fan and to help bring additional revenues into the sport. So, oh yeah, and they're professional athletes. At the end of the day, the fact that they can go and they can bet on Austin Matthews or they can bet on Josh Allen, why can't they bet on Mike McEwen and Colton Flash, right? They want it. I think they want to be treated and respected like pro athletes.
Hey, Nick, I want to talk about some of the fun things that you're doing, but I think it ties into this next question and what you just said about curling globally. And I think we know the sport's insanely popular in Canada. We see the broadcast numbers. We know the audiences. We also know the sport is growing globally. You watch your series, for example, and you see the rinks representing different countries around the world now. I do wonder what's the next step? Like where is the growth that needs to take place with the sport? And again, this is a real, we could talk for hours about this, but just how do you accomplish that? How do you grow this game?
So we're 36 minutes in. How much more time do you have? No, the reality is we've officially been in charge of the Grand Slam of curling, or had control of the Grand Slam of curling technically since June 30th, right? Curling, and I think we've talked about this before, but curling's the most, as a couple tidbits of information. Curling's the most watched Winter Olympic sport. Every 4 years, the whole world falls in love with curling. The last World Championships were viewed by 90 million people around the world, right? There were more Asian, there were more Japanese women curling teams in the Grand Slam of curling last event than there were Canadian women teams, right? Or I think it might have actually been exactly the same, but regardless. There is a massive international audience for the sport of curling. Now, unfortunately, for the sport of curling, the Grand Slam, which is the only event series around the world that features the world's best curlers, up until recently, it was owned by Sportsnet. Sportsnet's business operations are focused in Canada. So the fact that curling has been seeing significant growth in countries all over the world, supported by incredible curlers from those countries all over the world, didn't really matter to them because their business interest is in Canada. So what we've done for the first time, what we've really tried to do as the first step, is we want to provide access to the Grand Slam of curling to the curling fans all over the world that we know exist. So case in point, there's never been the Grand Slam of curling never had an app. And the Grand Slam of curling typically was broadcast from Thursday through Sunday, and it was typically 3 games a day out of the 16 that occurred. Yeah. The one thing that we heard from curling fans more than anything when we took over the slams was that they really wanted access to Tuesdays and Wednesdays, because Sportsnet only starts their broadcast on Thursday. So, understanding all of those things, the very first thing that we did was we partnered with another company called Home Team Live to produce a stream of every single sheet, every single draw, every single day. And we're distributing those streams for free through the GCOS app to curling fans all over the world. It was exciting to see in Charlottetown, our app peaked at number 4 in the App Store in Canada. During NISCU, it peaked at number 3, which was really exciting. But the most exciting thing that we learned from NISCU And we've done this with very little marketing, right? We haven't spent a lot of external marketing dollar at this point anywhere in the world. During our event in Nisku, we did over 279,000 unique viewers from around the world that averaged an hour and 34 minutes per user. Like those are real fucking numbers, man. Like, and that's without any marketing. So what that shows us is that there is a big appetite for curling around the world. There are users that have an insatiable appetite for this sport, and we're just getting started. I mean, Steve, the reason why I got so excited about what curling is, ironically, isn't actually the sport, isn't the stuff that I've been talking about. It's everything that Michael was shining a light on. It's you. I'm not a curler. You walk into a curling event, and it's unlike any other sporting experience that you really have the pleasure to walk into because of that connectivity with these world-class Olympic athletes. And so what excites me the most is using the appetite of the global curling fan and then helping to shine a light on everything that surrounds the sport, the lifestyle of the sport, the community of the sport, how incredibly relatable and likable and exciting these athletes are. Because I think when the non-hardcore curling fan understands how easy this sport is to really get into, and then how unbelievably connective these athletes are, I think there's a recipe there to really build something compelling for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And that's the stuff that really excites me because this is a massive global audience. Another example, we have a broadcast partner in Japan, and we have a partnership with a broadcast company called Abima. During our very first Grand Slam event at the Tour Challenge, which was in Charlottetown, PEI, Team Fujisawa, the one of the best Japanese teams, they made the semifinal. And because we were broadcasting their games in Japan, it made the highlight show of TV Asahi, which is one of the biggest Japanese sports broadcasters. And during Team Fujisawa's run to the semifinals, it was the number 2 sports story in all of Japan behind only Shohei Ohtani. Like, we talk about curling being a big Canadian sport, and it is. But it is becoming a very big sport in other parts of the world that candidly are bigger than Canada, right? So, as you start peeling back the onion of curling, you start realizing, like, maybe peeling back the onion is the wrong analogy, but you start realizing how meaty that onion is. Yeah, I got to work on that. So that analogy, because, makes your eyes water. It's so exciting. Maybe that's a little bit better anyway.
I think that's the onions. Hey, hey, Michael, just for what Nick just ripped off of there, it seems to me that you guys at All Sports Data, you've read this book several times over. I mean, you're dealing with sports like the World Surf League, where people don't know the athletes, but based on the limit, watching YouTube videos and following social media and reading some features, it's the same thing. We're professional surfers. There's some great human stories there. And again, just on a lot of those clients that you're dealing with on those, what you could call second, third, fourth tier sports, you've already been there.
That's right. And, something that's very interesting across all of these sports is third tier, fourth tier, fifth tier sport in terms of audience and global reach. First tier availability of story and athlete, crossovers that people can always find something that if you get to the top level in any sport, regardless of what sport it is, there are people there that have overcome many things that are interesting to hear about. And so regardless of sport, you will find those stories and those connections. And for us, I think, placing a bet on somebody that you don't know who's upcoming in a game or a match or a heat, and maybe you Google that person and maybe find out some things, and then maybe you become a fan of that athlete. I know that Gushu is a Canadian curler now, and I didn't know that coming into this event, but I consider myself a fan. I'm buying into his story, his team. They did incredible, and there's just a lot of camaraderie that you can get from even going to the events and then talking with those people. So I'm a fan of curlers that I've met and like them personally, which is another pretty insane thing to be able to say.
And what about Isabella Rana and the incredible Rana girls, Michael? I mean, they have to be one of your favorites after watching them do Mamma Mia on the Grand Slam of Karaoke stage.
They won everybody's hearts with the choreography. That was so incredible because the amount of dedication that they put into a karaoke event following the final and the championship. So insane to see. And I think, Nick, and you're alluding to the global audience here and the Onion, you did forget one of your favorite metrics. But this is, you look around the audience at a curling event, it is dead split 50-50 men and women. This is a sport that has a completely equal distribution of gender, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Also love the fact too that you're seeing generations now where you're seeing curling. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that Jennifer Jones, that her daughter one day is going to be a Canadian champion in curling at the Olympics, and we see the lineage and the broom getting passed from generation to generation in the curling family, which I love. We're about to wrap up here. I want to mention I'm going to include I'll include a link in the Substack post with the podcast of the Grand Slam and karaoke, because as Michael mentioned, it's a pile of fun, and the chance to hear John Morris sing and some of the other curlers. And we're also going to embed, there's a great YouTube video on the Grand Slam of Curling YouTube channel of Sylvia Terrazzoni and her Swiss teammates rocking the Home and Empires sweaters in Nisku. And again, just reflects this community and curlers having fun. And I think, Nick, just, these curlers, they realize they know how to market themselves. I mean, they're doing a wonderful job on social media, and I think that's certainly going to attract more and more of those young people to the sport.
Short wrist. Yeah, perfect. 11-5. Wait, stick. Behind me. Yeah. Right. Whoa. That boy.
Let's face it, I think athletes all over the world understand that they're not just professional athletes, they're also brands. And you want to be able to build your own social currency so you can not only connect with your fans in a deeper level, but then you can provide potential sponsors with new touch points at which they can then connect with with their fans. And it's a process. It's starting, but I think all we want to do is give them the platform. Right? They're the ones who are getting on stage and singing. They're the ones who are playing on the ice. We want to give them the brooms to go out there and sweep their way to victory. There you go. That was better than
that's better. There we go. Hey, Nick, I want to wrap up and just mention that your trip to Newfoundland next week, it's not going to be all about kissing the cod and doing the screech or whatever as they call it out there. But you've been public about your relationship with cancer. I think it was almost a year ago, maybe, that you did a run in concert with the Movember campaign. But you're gonna be taking your running shoes and shorts out to Newfoundland and running again next week for the Canadian Cancer Society.
Yeah. It's exciting. I mean, as you said, I've had cancer for a long time. I've had non-Hodgkin's for almost 16 years. Last year, partnering, in conjunction with the great team of PointsBet, I ended up running 269 kilometers in the month of November to try and raise some dough. And because our event in St. John's is wrapping in November, I was in St. John's over the summer, and I took a little trip up to the top of Signal Hill, Cabot Tower. And so what I decided to do in partnership with the Canadian Cancer Society to benefit Daffodil Place, which is a cancer house within St. John's that provides care and support for cancer, for people undergoing cancer treatment. On the Wednesday morning, I'm going to run from Daffodil House all the way to the top of Signal Hill, Cabot Tower, in hopes to raise some money for that awesome place. And we launched the campaign the other day, and I mean, it's just the little things that you can do to give back. I mean, I am a runner, and at the end of the day, it's I'll do whatever I can to help to help spread the word and candidly help spread hope. I mean, I'm lucky. I've had cancer for 16 years, and I'm still moving as fast as I ever did. Right. So, it's the least I can do to help shine a light on it. And honestly, I think we're going to probably do something very similar like this at every Grand Slam event. There's only one Signal Hill in the country, but there's amazing places and amazing activations in every city we go. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to try and partner with groups to help raise money in every place we go. Because I think giving back is really, really important. And, might as well do what I can, right? While I'm not old, where I'm not too old to run, put it that way.
Right. Hey, Nick, where can people go to make a donation for your run? I don't have a short. It's if they go to my Twitter or my LinkedIn, there's a post there, Steve. I'll flip you the link that maybe you can put in your Substack as well. And Grand Slam of Curling, we'll be posting it over the next week or so. And I appreciate the shout out, Steve. Every dollar counts, right? As we're trying to fight this terrible disease. Yeah, I have the link to the LinkedIn post, Nick, so I'll definitely share that in Substack so people have access to it next week. Nic Sulsky is the Chief Executive Officer of the Curling Group. Michael Jordan is the co-founder and head of product for Alt Sports Data. Hey, Michael, it was a real pleasure to meet you for the first time and to have you on the podcast. And let's maybe get you and your sidekick there together again once we get through the first season and you guys are really ready to roll with the product.
Absolutely, Steve. Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.
And Nick, thank you for giving us a bit of a scoop on this story, and wishing you the best of luck in Newfoundland next week, and we'll continue to follow the Grand Slam of Curling, and we'll plan on seeing you in Guelph in the new year.
Oh, that's great, Steve. Thanks so much for welcoming me back to the show, and don't forget to download the good old GCOS app and tune in to the Kioti National in good old St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, starting on Tuesday morning, bright and early.
There we go. That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show. As always, you can find us on Substack at gamingnewscanada.ca. These podcasts are also heard on all the various podcast platforms. Thanks again to Nic Sulsky and Michael Jordan for joining us today, and we will see everybody again very, very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Gaming News Canada show. Sign up for our newsletter at gamingnewscanada.ca. Follow Steve McAllister on LinkedIn. Message Steve if you're interested in being a sponsor or featured guest.